Welcome to this explainer. If you've been anywhere near the internet lately, you've definitely noticed it. Just a massive, exhausting spike in toxic arguments. It really feels like we're constantly trapped in these endless debates, completely talking past each other, right? Well, it turns out the root of all this frustration usually isn't a difference in our core beliefs. It's actually a total breakdown in how we define the words we're using. Today, we're going to unpack exactly why our modern definitions are causing so much chaos, and we'll look at how a centuries-old linguistic framework can actually solve our very modern communication crisis.
Let's just plunge right into the friction. Take the question, is Islam an ideology? Throwing that single question into a comment section is guaranteed to ignite a massive fight. But why? Well, it's because we're taking a modern Western term and slapping it onto ancient concepts, which instantly creates a ton of confusion. When we try to force-fit these modern labels onto classical texts or beliefs, we inevitably end up screaming at each other over the label itself, completely missing the actual meaning underneath.
So, how do we fix this modern misunderstanding? We actually need to look back at an ancient science known as usul al-fiqh, or the foundations of Islamic jurisprudence. See, because the foundational Islamic texts, the Qur'an and the Sunnah, were revealed in Arabic, early scholars had to build some incredibly precise rules. They needed a strict system to figure out exactly what specific Arabic words meant back then, and how context changed those meanings. Honestly, it's the ultimate tool to cut through today's semantic noise.
Okay, let's dive into our first section, the Golden Rule of Revelation. This is the absolute core rule you have to grasp. If you want to derive a ruling or understand a specific belief from these texts, the Arabic meaning of the word absolutely must have been known to the Arabs at the time of revelation. We're talking about the Prophet and his companions. You literally cannot reverse engineer some modern definition that was invented centuries later and shove it back into an ancient text to create a new rule. It's a strict, non-negotiable linguistic boundary.
Let me show you exactly how breaking this rule completely changes a text. Take the Arabic word khatam. At the time of revelation, this word was clearly understood to mean seal, specifically the final seal. But later on, the Ahmadiyya movement reinterpreted khatam in a metaphorical way to mean best. So instead of reading the text as the final seal of the prophets, they read it as the best of the prophets. Classical scholars completely reject that interpretation, though, simply because khatam never possessed that metaphorical meaning of best in the Arabic language back then. You just can't invent a new meaning centuries after the fact.
Moving right along to Section 2, the 5 categories of meaning. To keep things structured, scholars actually divided word meanings into 5 distinct buckets. We've got linguistic, customary, technical, sharia, and metaphorical. Understanding exactly which category a word falls into is your roadmap. It's literally the key to unlocking the true intended meaning of anything you're reading. Let's kick things off with Section 3, linguistic and customary shifts. This concept makes total sense when we look at everyday English. Take the word gay. Linguistically, like the pure original dictionary definition, it meant joyful or carefree. But over time, through what we call a customary shift, society completely overwrote that original meaning. Today, its customary everyday meaning refers to same-sex relations. Think about it. If you went to court today and tried to defend using a slur by arguing, "Hey, I just meant joyful," the judge would laugh you out of the room. Customary meaning completely overrides the old linguistic meaning in the real world.
And we see the exact same thing happen in classical Arabic. Take the word al-ghayat. Originally, linguistically, it just meant a low place in the earth, like a valley. But by the time of revelation, the custom of society had shifted its meaning to refer to human excretion or going to the toilet. This shift is absolutely vital to know. Why? Because when the Quran mentions al-ghayat in the context of breaking your ritual washing or wudu, we know for a fact it means going to the bathroom. It definitely doesn't mean you lose your purity just by taking a walk through a low valley.
But here is where you have to be super careful. You cannot apply today's customary meaning to yesterday's text. My favorite example is the word sayyara. In the Quranic story of Joseph, his brothers throw him into a well for a sayyara to find. Back then, sayyara meant a passing caravan. But if you speak modern Arabic today, you know sayyara means a car. Think about the sheer absurdity of reading that ancient text with the modern meaning. Joseph's brothers threw him down a well for a passing Honda Civic to find? It's ridiculous. Yet, that is exactly what happens when we ignore historical definitions.
Which brings us to Section 4, technical meaning, or istilah.
We do this all the time in modern English, too. Think about the word domain. Linguistically, it's a piece of territory ruled by a king or a government. But the IT world took that everyday word and gave it a highly specialized technical meaning,
a website URL. If a web developer emails you asking for your domain, they definitely aren't asking what country you're the king of, they're using the technical meaning. A brilliant Arabic example of this is the word hukm. To the early Arabs, the original linguistic meaning of hukm was actually the metal bit placed inside a horse's mouth. It was the tool the rider used to control and guide the animal. But over time, it evolved into a technical term for political ruling and passing judgment. You can totally see the connection there, right? Guiding society and preventing corruption is just like steering that horse. So, when classical texts use hukm in relation to a leader, it carries that heavy, technical weight of governance and the judiciary.
Let's look at Section 5, Sharia and metaphorical meanings.
For the Sharia category, you really don't need to look any further than the word salah. Linguistically, salah just meant making a supplication or a simple prayer, what's known as dua. But the Sharia came in, took this standard word, and assigned it a completely new, highly structured definition, the 5 daily prayers, complete with the specific bowing and prostrating. When the text commands you to establish salah, it doesn't just mean raise your hands and wish for a good day. The Sharia meaning comes in and totally overrides the dictionary one.
Then we have the metaphorical category. The Arabic word lams literally means physical touch. But as we know, language is rich in poetic. Touch is very commonly used as a metaphor for sexual intercourse. Because of this dual meaning, classical scholars actually differ on verses regarding touching women and whether or not it breaks ritual purity. Shafi'i scholars tend to stick to the literal, linguistic, physical touch, while Hanafi scholars interpret the text metaphorically as intimacy. Neither side is wrong about the language, they're just weighing the categories of meaning differently.
And that takes us to our final section, Section 6, Meaning over Disputed Words.
Bringing this back to our modern internet era, a few years ago, the scholar Hamza Yusuf faced massive online backlash because he said that Islam is not an ideology. People were absolutely furious. They assumed he was saying Islam wasn't a comprehensive way of life. But if you actually look at the terminology, ideology translates to ideologia, which is literally a modern foreign loan word. In classical Arabic, even the word for thought, fikr, had kind of a negative connotation, implying plotting or calculating. He was simply rejecting the modern imported technical label, not the core belief itself. All that friction was just completely unnecessary.
So, the crucial point here is summed up perfectly by this ancient Sharia maxim: there is no dispute over terminology after agreement on the meaning. Honestly, arguing over imported, modern labels like ideology or democracy or state is a total waste of time if we already agree on the underlying core concepts. We're out here fighting to the death over the wrapper and completely ignoring the candy inside.
And this is the ultimate trap of modern terminology. Social media essentially trains keyboard warriors to jump straight from sensation to action. We see a word we don't like, we immediately map our own modern, highly specific definition onto it, and we go straight to war in the comments section. We completely fail to pause and ask how the author or the historical text was actually defining that word in the first place. But this kind of linguistic carelessness isn't just annoying. From an Islamic perspective, it's actually spiritually dangerous. The Prophet Muhammad warned that a person might speak a word displeasing to God, thinking absolutely nothing of it, maybe just firing off a quick tweet, yet by that single careless word, they plummet into hell. Internet slander that's based on simple semantic misunderstandings carries a massive, terrifying real-world weight. There's actually a famous tradition about the bankrupt person that perfectly captures this. It describes someone who does everything right in life. They pray, they fast, they give to charity, but they show up on the day of judgment entirely bankrupt. Why? Because they couldn't control their tongue. They insulted people, they slandered, they engaged in toxic attacks. Wasting a whole lifetime of good deeds simply because you couldn't control your online insults over a misunderstood word? That is a profound tragedy. So, I want to leave you with this challenge. The very next time you feel that familiar urge to jump into an online debate, just take a breath. Remember those 5 categories of meaning. And before you type a single letter of your next comment, ask yourself, are we actually arguing over the true core meaning here, or am I just getting triggered by the modern terminology? If we all start applying this ancient wisdom, we might just make the modern internet a slightly more understandable place. Thanks for joining this explainer.